We're being overrun! Situation contained. Well done. Outpost under control. Enemy infantry! Enemy infantry in sight! Hostile walker! Enemy walker spotted! Position. Heads up, supplies at your position. Enemy infantry in sight. Walker spotted. It's definitely hostile. Enemy infantry. Soldier, you deserve an award. Threat spotted. Sniper! Enemy sniper! Enemy infantry in sight. Is lost. Outpost under control. Outpost under control. Nice! Thanks! Enemy infantry in sight. Enemy walker spotted. Enemy walker spotted. Soldier, you deserve an award. Assault speeder spotted! Enemy walker spotted! Hostile walker! Outpost under control. Enemy infantry is lost. Enemy infantry in sight. Enemy infantry. Awesome, thanks. Enemy infantry spotted. I need a lift! Threat spotted! We got company! We got company! Threat spotted! Assault speeder spotted! An outpost is lost. Repairs needed here. Assault this position. Under control. Enemy forces in sight. All right. All right. Threat spotted. Grease monkey! We got enemy infantry! We got company! Threat spotted! Outpost under control. Outpost under control. Strike this position! All right. Hostile infantry in sight. Enemy infantry!
This is AdLink's Ampere Ultra Developer Workstation in the
In the first of its kind House hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, whistleblower David Brush blew open a discussion about interdimensional beings, touching on holographic theory. Let's listen.
In terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine 3D objects such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
If any of that went over your head, Professor of Science at Harvard and author of Extraterrestrial, The First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth, Dr. Avi Loeb, is joining us to break this down. Welcome, Dr. Loeb.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about what he's explaining there, the holographic theory, and how that might help us understand the technology that UAPs or UFOs are using?
I don't think that's very relevant. The holographic principle is a concept considered in the context of string theory in a way of unifying quantum mechanics and gravity in the context of extra dimensions, meaning we know of 3 dimensions of space and of time. And string theory argues that in order to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, the 2 pillars of modern physics, they need to consider additional spatial dimensions. And then they have proven mathematically some equivalence between quantum field theory and gravity within those extra dimensions. That's, first of all, not known to be a description of reality. String theory is a purely mathematical concept at the moment. We don't know whether there are extra dimensions. Theoretical physicists talk about it for decades, but we have no clue whatsoever that there is any extra dimension beyond the 3 spatial dimensions we have. So mentioning that in the context of technology is completely inappropriate, because we don't know whether even there are extra dimensions and whether it applies to the reality that we all share. It's just a mathematical concept at this point within string theory, which is not proven by any means to be correct. There was no experimental evidence for string theory, and we don't see any prospect for getting experimental evidence in the coming decades. So the way I would think of it is just as a mathematical concept that has no relevance to technology, no relevance to the real world, and I'm just surprised that he even mentioned that.
And he did say that it was just a theoretical concept, but I also was kind of confused as to why it was brought up. I mean, based on your research, what is the best explanation of where these UAPs are coming from exactly, if not a different realm or different period of time?
Well, we can, first of all, they're not moving at speeds that cannot be explained by conventional physics. I mean, they might be moving at speeds and accelerations that exceed those attainable by our technology, but you know, they don't move faster than light. They don't move at an acceleration that cannot be explained. And so if there are functional devices near Earth that were constructed by some alien technological manufacturer, you know, they might have propulsion systems that are different than the ones we use. And you know, I wouldn't call for new physics in this context. The people that are talking about new physics often are not very familiar with old physics, the physics we know. So for them, talking about new physics is an easy thing. But if you look at modern physics, you know, over the past few decades, it was really difficult to find new principles, new laws of physics, new phenomena. Every time a nuance is found on what we already know, it gets the Nobel Prize. And so, and actually the recent Nobel Prizes were awarded for things that were known for decades. So it's just non-professional for someone that doesn't know the physics we actually already know to talk about new physics. And moreover, you know, if we don't have good data, in these cases of the Nimitz incident and of what you know, the pilots are talking about, the Ryan Graves was talking about, you know, we don't have the data. We don't have any physical evidence measurements that can allow us to assess what they were reporting about. So talking about new physics is irresponsible under these circumstances. In order to consider new physics, we need exquisite data that we cannot explain with conventional physics. And non-professionals just talk about it in a cavalier way. Just, you know, well, maybe it's new physics, but that's not the way science is done. We need exquisite data from instruments, not from eyewitnesses. And we don't have that for these reports.
So, Dr. Loeb, with the existing physics that we have and have proven with many years of science, it seems to me that people are just inventing new physics to try and explain something other than perhaps aliens exist. What do you make of what's coming out in the hearing? Do you find that there's merit in Grush's claims about UFOs and UAPs that have been obtained by the U.S. government, military and intelligence community, and that there are biologics, as Grush said?
Yeah, so just think of yourself as a juror listening to witnesses in the courtroom. And the question is, would you believe him? Would you believe them? Now, they talk about experiences, the pilots. We haven't had access to the actual data, so we cannot assess whether what they're talking about is just their personal impressions and how reliable these are, how unusual the phenomena that they saw were. And with respect to Grush, I would like to see someone who had first-hand experience of the evidence, like saw the materials, saw the actual spacecraft that he's talking about and talks about it. He is talking about what other people told him. 40 witnesses. I don't care about how many people talked with him. The issue is I want to hear someone who actually saw the materials, or I want to see some footage, or I want to get some information, evidence that as a scientist I can analyze. Without that, it's just hearsay. Now, of course, the important development from this hearing is that he was willing to provide contacts, information to representatives such that they would contact people with first-hand experience. And presumably that could lead to the release of information. But until that information is released, until we see footage, until we actually see a spacecraft or materials that came from there, we cannot assess whether it's real. It could be all fabricated.
Right, and I understand at some point during the hearing, some lawmakers went into a skiff with David Grush to apparently review some video evidence or get the names of these individuals that they could reach out to. Aside from whether or not Grush's claims are believable or need more evidence attached to them, do you think it's a good sign in general that this hearing was had at all? And does this suggest that these lawmakers are taking the issue of UAPs seriously?
Definitely. I think the real meat is in the classified information. Okay, so we are not exposed to that. And perhaps some people who saw it initiated this process. And for us, it doesn't look as convincing as of now, but it would lead to some release of evidence and data. And, as an astronomer, it looks completely reasonable to expect the US government to be the first to notice something unusual because they monitor the sky during their day job for national security purposes, and they would be the first to notice something unusual in our sky, something crashing. Astronomers focus their telescopes on very distant sources of light. They ignore anything very close to Earth. And so, it's quite possible the US government has possession or information about the alien technologies. As a scientist, the sky is not classified, the oceans are not classified, so I'm seeking personally evidence for what lies in interstellar space. We just came back a month ago from an expedition to the Pacific Ocean to retrieve materials from the first recognized interstellar meteor. That's an object bigger than half a meter that collided with Earth, had an unusual material strength, and was moving faster than 95% of the stars in the vicinity of the sun. And we want to check whether it's technological in origin. We are currently analyzing the materials at Harvard University and trying to figure it out.
Thank you, Dr. Avi Loeb, for breaking this down with us. I think this is on a lot of people's minds right now, given the congressional hearing. Looking forward to follow up.
I need a ride.
Thank you.
Jump in. Right, enemy infantry spotted. All right.
Leaves only a few paragraphs in a 900-page tome. The report defends the lack of initiative in Shag Harbor by arguing no further investigation by the project was considered justifiable. This conclusion of the Shag Harbor case is consistent with Condon's overview of UFO research. Our general conclusion is that nothing has come from the study of UFOs in the past 21 years that has added to scientific knowledge.
I think one of the things that happens when a serious scientific study is carried out to look at the UFO situation in specific cases, there's often a criteria that's very formal and rigid. And often what happens is the best cases somehow, no matter how you use your definitions, no matter how carefully you are, will slip through the cracks. And I believe that's what happened to Shag Harbor.
With no one pushing for answers, Canada's Shag Harbor incident becomes another unexplained mystery that is all but forgotten.
It quickly faded from the headlines and became a back-page story, and a month later it would have been hard to find anything on it, and people went home, made a sandwich, went to work, life went on.
Infantry in sight.
But 25 years later, a new investigation is launched into the Shag Harbor incident. This time, some startling revelations make it clear that the book should never have been closed on this case.
Outpost under control.
In October of 1967, over a dozen witnesses see a UFO plunge into Shag Harbor, Canada.
Acknowledge.
25 years later, unanswered questions remain.
That's where it all took place, right out there. We knew that something came down out of the air and something landed in the water. But what it was, we didn't know.
One of the other eyewitnesses that night cannot forget what he saw over the harbor. Chris Stiles had seen the UFO from his home in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. In 1992, while watching TV one night, everything would change.
I had watched a rebroadcast of the Unsolved Mysteries episode that dealt with the Roswell incident. And it made me think about Shag Harbor. And what I remembered and what was so tantalizing about Shag Harbor was that there was no denial that the authorities believed that this was a genuine UFO incident. And it had simply faded from memory.
Stiles decides to launch his own investigation into Shag Harbor. He requests documents from the Canadian National Archives and the Department of National Defence using Canada's Access to Information Act. In a few weeks, the government documents arrive on spools of microfilm at the main branch of the Halifax Library. A tedious search begins.
As you sit at the viewer and start going through document after document, you realize that often these collections were compiled by bureaucrats who threw away nothing.
The microfilm contains thousands of documents of UFO cases across Canada from 1965 to 1981.
You're looking for an extraterrestrial straw in a terrestrial haystack.
Stiles spends weeks at the microfilm viewer until he hits pay dirt. It was all there. Priority telexes from the Rescue Coordination Center to the Canadian Forces Headquarters. Instructions from the Canadian Maritime Command to the Atlantic Fleet Diving Unit. And reports by dozens of witnesses. Stiles realizes that he is looking at the biggest UFO event in Canada's history.
I only saw one that had UFO written on it with 3 big letters, underlined 3 times, and that had to do with the Shag Harbor incident. I knew very early on that I had primary documents and a paper trail a mile wide here.
Has Chris Stiles stumbled upon a Canadian government cover-up?
Outpost secured.
Stiles decides he needs help. He contacts fellow UFO researcher Don Ledger to assist with his investigation.
Chris Stiles was very passionate about Shag Harbor. He'd been at it for about a year to a year and a half at that point, researching it, digging out the documents and so on. And he was infectious. Eventually dragged me into
Enemy
it as well.
forces in sight.
A careful examination of these declassified documents paints a vivid timeline of the events and helps bring the night of October 4th, 1967 back to life.
I was very impressed with the paper trail for the Shag Harbor incident. It just pretty much laid out the whole thing.
For Stiles, the documents also suggest that the Canadian military knew more than they were telling.
I think what surprised me most was how comfortable these military people seemed with the possibility that they might actually be looking for an object of extraterrestrial origin. In a sense, it was kind of an acknowledgement of UFO reality.
Stiles uncovers documents that demonstrate that the sightings of October 4th were not confined to Shag Harbor alone. Reports came in from witnesses from all over Nova Scotia that night. He then comes across eyewitness testimony from an unexpected but extremely reliable source, experienced airline pilots. At 7:15 p.m. on October 4th, 1967, 2 pilots on Air Canada Flight 305 are flying at an altitude of 12,000 feet over southeastern Quebec. Captain Pierre Charbonneau and First Officer Robert Ralph glance out of the left cockpit window and see something astounding.
What they saw that night was a large, round, colored object in the sky that looked like, to them, like a kite with a tail on it. It was off their left wing and just slightly above their altitude.
The experienced pilots are at a loss. They observe the strange shape for several minutes when suddenly they see a series of explosions. According to their testimony, they begin to take evasive action when the UFO disappears into a wisp of clouds. After some deliberation, the pilots decide to file official reports about the bizarre occurrence.
It's not common for pilots to go on record and report a UFO, particularly commercial pilot, because of maybe some recrimination later on from his employers, or maybe some ridicule from his peers.
Continuing his research, Stiles uncovers more information from an unexpected source. At St. Mary's University in Halifax, Stiles finds a treasure trove of X-Files collected by none other than the UFO skeptic who had downplayed the Shag Harbor incident in the press, Father Burke Gaffney.
And an X-file is not just a secret file, but a file that is not admitted to by the originating agency. So it was great that they were there because there was no record of these in Ottawa, either at National Archives or RCMP headquarters.
The RCMP X-Files collected by Burke Gaffney provide more telling details about the night of October 4th. One report includes the testimony of a ship captain named Leo Mercy.
He's the captain of a fishing dragger that has 18 men off the coast of Sambor, Nova Scotia. And it's got 4 UFOs in the distance in a box pattern.
And he looked at them, and then he went and he checked them. He found them on radar.
But Mercy's report contains something even more puzzling. A reference to another underwater search near Shelburne, 31 miles northeast of Shag Harbor.
His statement in this X-file, he says, perhaps it's like the thing they're looking for down off Shelburne or off Shag Harbor. So this would seem that there was indeed a second simultaneous search effort.
Did the UFO somehow travel away from Shag Harbor after it crashed? As it happens, the town of Shelburne is also home to a former Canadian military base. Is it somehow connected to the secrecy surrounding the Shag Harbor sightings? In fact, during the 1960s, the Shelburne facility was officially called an Oceanographic Institute, but its real identity was shrouded in Cold War intrigue. In its heyday, it served as a top-secret listening post to track Soviet submarine movements in the North Atlantic Ocean for the U.S. Navy.
A Soviet submarine would come out in the Atlantic from Russia and go on its tour. They would pick up the engine noises and the hull sounds made by the submarine passing through the water on the microphones. This would be fed into a computer so they could get a match later on for if the same submarine came out.
Could the Canadian authorities have used this submarine tracking technology to locate a submerged UFO?
Enemy forces in sight!
Was the Navy secretly searching the waters off Shelburne while all eyes were focused on Shag Harbor? To continue his investigation, Stiles sets out to track down those who would know best, the divers who actually probed the depths of Shag Harbor.
Enemy Walker in sight.
On October 4th, 1967, Chris Stiles was one of many witnesses who saw something strange in the skies over Nova Scotia. Now he is on the hunt to try to find out what it was. He has uncovered declassified government documents indicating that the Canadian military was involved in an intense search for a UFO that apparently crashed into Shag Harbor. The Canadian authorities assert that nothing was found. But Stiles begins to suspect that the divers may hold the key to the mystery.
A number were unwilling to talk, but a few were. And they told a very interesting tale that went well beyond what was in the press clippings.
April 9th, 1993. One of the divers agrees to an interview with Stiles, but demands that his identity be kept anonymous. Stiles is shocked when the diver informs him that they did indeed find something underwater, but it was not in Shag Harbor.
He eventually explained that by the time divers had arrived in Shag Harbor, they knew the object was no longer there, that indeed it had come to rest on the seabed 25 miles away, off Government Point near the Shelburne base.
Had the UFO eluded the search efforts at Shag Harbor by traveling underwater under its own power up the coast of Nova Scotia? If true, this would mean that the Canadian military conducted a secret search at Shelburne that was then concealed from the public. The diver's new revelation is confounding to Stiles.
I found the Shelburne story very troubling. You know, there were a lot of things that were certain. We had government documents, but now there was a black box element to the case. And at first I was very wary of it, very dubious of the claim.
Now, Chris Stiles is wondering if the naval search at Shag Harbor was just an elaborate decoy for the real search the diver is now telling him about. When pressed for details, the diver's story becomes even more incredible.
When the divers were dispatched to the Shelburne location, they dove over the object and found that indeed there was, in fact, even a second object there, which they described as lending assistance to the first. I didn't know what to make of this. This is well beyond events in the Shag Harbor incident.
The diver informed Stiles that a flotilla of U.S. Navy and Canadian ships actually anchored over the two objects at Shelburne and monitored their activities.
And as he said, when he dove, him and a partner, they were shocked to find there was still activity going on, and they indeed saw beings.
They were on the bottom, and they watched what they thought was creatures from one object giving aid to the other.
The Canadian diver's story does not end there. He says that the Navy flotilla observed the two UFOs for 7 days. Suddenly, the operation was interrupted by a Russian submarine crossing into Canadian territorial waters. At this critical juncture, the Navy ships were diverted to intercept the sub.
They attempt to intercept the Soviet sub, trying to cut it off. And it's at this point, when they're doing this maneuver, that the two UFOs begin to move back toward the Gulf of Maine, and indeed, eventually, as reported, break the surface and fly away.
Got it. Sorry,
Are there
enemy
any
infantry.
witnesses on record that can corroborate the diver's fantastic story? Did anyone see these two UFOs leaving the waters off Shelburne? Perhaps. At 10 o'clock on October 11th, 1967, exactly 1 week after the Shag Harbor sightings, the mysterious lights in the sky were seen once again, this time by a family in Lower Woods Harbor, 35 miles from Shelburne.
We look at what's known as the Lachlan Cameron sighting 1 week later, to the hour, and we see two sets of lights leaving the area of Shag Harbor and flying away. It fits the diver's story like a glove. It's hard to ignore that synchronicity.
And we are left to wonder, did an alien spacecraft really crash into Shag Harbor as the Navy diver suggests? Or could there be another explanation? An important clue to that question may still exist if what one former lighthouse keeper says is true.
The second day, I did find a cylinder. I knew it was something different, something I had never seen before. It was a cylinder type shape, 30 inches, 30 to 40 inches long maybe, 15, 18 inches in diameter. Had been partially burned, wires protruding.
Enemy forces!
Terrible odor.
After finding the cylinder on the rocky shore of Bon Portage Island, Banks says he notified the Canadian Department of Transportation. They informed him to carefully pack the object and deliver it to an American naval officer at Prospect Point Wharf.
It had to be something that they wanted bad, because they flew him in from Virginia. Or that's just what he told me.
But what was inside the cylinder that was so urgent and so secret?
I was working for the federal government at the time, and I don't really feel comfortable answering it.
It's an ongoing mystery that continues to invite speculation. For some, the evidence points to the secret military experiments of the Cold War.
Theorized in my own mind that probably this was some kind of experimental drone or something that they had back then.
An outpost is lost.
One of the first ones that they had that somehow got away from
sniper! Understood.
It was a surveillance type of thing, and it either crashed on its own or they crashed it.
My opinion was still it was a plane, American military plane.
Others contend that something capable of operating both above and below the water can only be extraterrestrial.
Even now in this time of stealth aircraft, we still don't have anything that's both aerodynamic and hydrodynamic.
What the object is, that's what everybody always wants to know. What was the object? Whatever went into the harbor that night was intelligently controlled, and it was of extraterrestrial nature.
It is unclear when, if ever, the complete set of military records will be released. If they are, will they shed light on this strange incident and maybe even settle once and for all what happened in Shag Harbor on October 4th, 1967? Until then, we are left with the mystery, speculation, and the fading memory of the people who saw something very unusual crash into the ocean that night.
Today, I still scan the sky looking for something that might be different or something like what I seen back 30-odd years ago. Only thing that I would like to know is what it was.
Outpost under control.
It's an explosive tale that's been lost in the sands and weeds of the Mexican desert.
There were rumors since long ago that an object crashed in Mexico.
In 1974, a mysterious incident took place that some say involved a UFO and a small plane on a collision course.
Enemy walker in sight.
Followed by a race between two governments to recover the debris.
The Mexican recovery team finds a sort of a silver-shaped plastic disc.
The Mexican military recovered an object and had it on a truck, and something killed all the men.
The U.S. government responded very quickly and very organized. They've done this before.
But what happened in the Mexican desert is just the beginning of that country's UFO history.
The eclipse from July 11, 1991, it practically branded the modern era of UFOs in Mexico.
Over the last several decades, it has become a hotbed for UFO encounters.
When they picked up the object on radar, the first thing they did was start looking at it.
Go, go,
and
go!
Everyone from pilots to politicians have been witness to sightings.
Would you say to the governor that he didn't see something strange in the sky?
In the next hour, eyewitness interviews, never before seen footage, and expert analysis trying to solve the mystery of what really happened that day in the Mexican desert in 1974, and the rash of documented sightings ever since.
Soldier, you deserve an award.
Coyame, Mexico, a small town not found on many maps, a place swallowed up by the Mexican desert, home to more agave plants than people.
Coyame is situated in the northern part of the state of Chihuahua, and our municipality is 7,000 square feet. We have between 2,000 and 2,500 people. It's a calm place, a beautiful place.
A place with no library, no archives, and no local historian. But that doesn't mean it's a town without a history. Here, history is passed from neighbor to neighbor. And it's this oral history that gives testimony to an unsolved air collision that took place here just 3 decades ago. It began as a civilian plane took off from El Paso, Texas, en route to Mexico City.
Man down! Man down! 25th, 19th.
Enemy infantry in sight.
There was a plane that was coming out from El Paso. It was going to Mexico City, and it was an accident. Man down!
They say that there was a crash between a plane and a UFO within the territories of the municipality.
I don't think this could be made up. How could someone make this up? It's true.
We got
August
company.
25th, 1974, 10:07 p.m. It's a quiet summer's night in Coyame. The town's inhabitants are beginning to turn in. 500 miles away, United States air defense systems suddenly register an unknown flying object over the Gulf of Mexico. Streaking across the sky at over 2,500 miles per hour, at an altitude of 75,000 feet, only one thing is for certain. This is not something man-made. Initial indications are that it's probably nothing more than a meteor. But 60 seconds later, it becomes clear that this is no meteor.
This object was traveling and descending through steps, unlike that of a meteor.
Enemy walker spotted!
With more of an arc.
The object appears headed on a course towards Corpus Christi, Texas.
We lost an
American air defense systems are alerted.
10:11
p.m.
The unidentified flying object now suddenly veers left and enters Mexican airspace just 40 miles south of Brownsville, Texas.
Enemy infantry!
The U.S. continues tracking the puzzling spacecraft as it now races over Mexico. Yet what isn't seen on radar is a small craft headed on a trajectory towards the UFO.
What's also interesting about this case is about the same time as this UFO was zigging and zagging, there was a plane that was leaving El Paso headed towards Mexico City.
Under the cover of night, the small civilian plane from El Paso heads towards Mexico's capital city. But the plane from Texas never reaches its destination. At the same time, the American military watches as their unidentified flying object disappears from radar. It appears that the unthinkable has happened. A UFO plane collision.
There's an assumption that there was a collision of some type where both the craft and the plane had collided.
August 26, 1974, 8 a.m. 9 hours after a civilian plane disappeared over the desert, a Mexican recovery team hunts for the downed craft. Across the border, American intelligence is listening in. At 10:35 a.m., the Americans intercept the Mexican military radio report. The wreckage of the missing plane has been spotted just outside Coyame. Moments later, another report shockingly announces the sighting of a second wreck, but this is no plane.
Enemy infantry!
The Mexican recovery team finds a sort of a silver-shaped classic disc, some 16 feet 5 inches, about 5 feet thick, convex on both sides, sort of like a saucer.
The saucer's surface has the appearance of polished steel. It has no markings, no lights, and there are no bodies inside. However, it does appear to be damaged in 2 spots, possibly caused by a collision with the civilian plane and then falling to the ground. Immediately, Mexican officials declare a radio silence on all search activities.
Acknowledged. Assault this position.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials reach out to the Mexican government, offering assistance in the recovery. Their offer is met with a denial.
Stand by for the Mexican government denied it. They said, no, all we have is just a plane wreckage.
While the Mexican team collects the crashed debris, the United States is busy assembling their own elite recovery force at Fort Bliss, Texas. The team includes 4 helicopters, 3 small Hueys, and a large Sea Stallion. Prepped and ready to move out, the team is placed on standby while U.S. surveillance scopes out the situation.
The U.S. was keeping tabs again through its spy, well, what I call the spy surveillance network, through their satellite surveillance as well as airplanes that were flying over at low altitude.
American surveillance reveals that the Mexicans have placed the UFO in a flatbed truck and moved out from the crash site.
They were able to see there were a number of dead bodies, so which led them to believe that something very extraordinary had happened.
August 27th, 2:38 p.m. Unsure of what's happened, U.S. officials greenlight their rescue team.
Initiating
4 helicopters with team members aboard depart Fort Bliss.
One of the things that seems obvious in this case is that the U.S. government responded very expertly, very quickly, and very organized. They had this team that assembled in Fort Bliss, and in no time were down there on site recovering this. They've done this before.
But nothing will prepare the Americans for what they are about to find.
I need a ride! We're almost out of reinforcement.
Dressed in bioprotection suits, the American soldiers approach the silent convoy and find all the Mexicans dead.
Enemy sniper!
There is no time to investigate what killed the Mexican team, but ufologists have their theories.
Acknowledged.
Deployed.
Acknowledged.
They somehow came in contact with a
hostile infantry.
lethal agent, a bacteriological agent that was from out of this world or an extraterrestrial biological agent of some sort that killed them, which is my favorite theory.
The U.S. recovery team quickly tends to business. It finds the 16-foot wide silver UFO strapped to the back of a flatbed truck. The straps are reconfigured and connected to a cargo cable from the Sea Stallion helicopter. Safely secure, the estimated 1,500-pound disc is lifted up and headed back to the U.S. With the saucer gone, the team immediately turns their attention to the remaining evidence. The plane wreckage, vehicles from the convoy, and the Mexican team bodies are gathered.
They gathered the debris, the bodies from the Mexican recovery team, and then they exploded them with high explosives. The reason why is to hide the evidence.
Their work done, the recovery team heads back to base. Where the UFO was taken is unknown. Some have speculated Atlanta, Fort Bliss, or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
It is an unprecedented event, and I think it's comparable to what happened in Roswell, New Mexico.
If this 1974 UFO crash was real, there was no evidence to prove it. Only the passing down of the story from generation to generation kept the tale alive, but few took it seriously.
No can do.
That changed in 1991. That year, not one, not two, but dozens of UFO sightings are reported over Mexico. What gives the 1991 sightings credibility is that strangers reported seeing the same thing, at the same time, on the same day, and yet, they were hundreds of miles apart from each other.
Up there! Enemy gunship!
For over 3 decades, the Mexican desert is alleged to have been the site of an incredible tale.
Walker!
There were rumors since long ago that an object crashed in Mexico.
An object entered our atmosphere through the United States, and it crashed with a small plane.
For the last 2 decades, Mexico has witnessed UFO incidents that rival anything reported in the United States. Mexicans just needed one uniting event to keep their eyes focused to the sky. That happened in 1991.
Move it!
In July of that year, one of the longest solar eclipses in history is set to happen.
Grease monkey!
The total eclipse is visible only in a narrow corridor that includes central Mexico.
A year in advance, all the Mexican people knew about the eclipse in '91. I mean, it was an event, it was a moment. All around Mexico, there were people waiting for the eclipse.
It was an important eclipse because even though there have been other eclipses that had taken place until that day, they were not of the magnitude of that eclipse.
Just after 1 p.m., the skies above Mexico darken. Astronomers adjust their telescopes. Millions gaze skyward. During 1991, consumer technology makes videos commonplace. On this day, many Mexicans use their cameras to capture the moon as it begins to pass in front of the sun. To their disbelief, they also capture something unexpected.
It was a curious thing. During the eclipse, I heard some people who were around us saying, "Look, what is that there also?"
Several people filmed and saw metallic objects that are clearly distinguished with the form of a cupola, on what is commonly called a flying object.
In Mexico City, in Tepeji del Rio, in Puebla, in Cerro de la Estrella. From all corners of Mexico come videos showing a strange metallic-looking object just below the eclipse. The eclipse UFOs, or ovnis as they are called in Mexico, become the talk of the country. But while some are quick to claim that Mexico experienced a UFO encounter, skeptics aren't buying it.
This was one of the great events of the century as far as eclipses and astronomical events, and hundreds and thousands of astronomers, professional and advanced amateur astronomers, came from all over the world, and it converged upon Mexico City and the other towns where the eclipse was visible. not a single professional astronomer reported seeing anything that wasn't supposed to be there.
Professional astronomers immediately doubt any UFO claims and instead offer a more scholarly response.
When the sun is totally eclipsed, like it was in Mexico on that day, the bright stars and planets become visible for a few minutes. And Venus was very brilliant, and so it was very easy to see when people looked up. And I'm sure that many of the people thought that they saw a UFO.
Skeptics have their answer, but UFO believers have their doubts.
Because of that, because so many people recorded in different cities these objects, some suggested that had to be the star Venus. But Venus was in a different position than the UFOs were in the tapes.
It was something strange that happened during the eclipse. It's afterwards, when you start analyzing and looking at the videos, that you can start to see in some of them that there are movements that maybe wouldn't correspond to a planet. When you start analyzing more calmly after the fact, that's when you start to wonder if it could have been a UFO.
We got company!
The 1991 sightings ignite a UFO explosion in Mexico.
The effect of the UFOs from the 1991 eclipse was like a snowball. And this allowed people with an interest in UFOs to record sightings more frequently.
While Mexico's UFO explosion comes as a surprise to most, some ufologists believe it was actually predicted over 1,000 years ago. The Maya were one of the great civilizations in history. For over 600 years, they built cities, constructed reservoirs and temple pyramids, and developed an incredible understanding of astronomy.
Soldier, you deserve an award.
It is incredible the knowledge that the Maya had about the sky and the planets. They had a great capacity of observation, they knew the celestial movement, and were able to determine every single important event that was going to be registered in the sky.
The Maya recorded their information on foldable books called codices. Most of these texts were burned by Spanish priests during the 1500s. Today, just 4 Mayan codices remain. Among them is the Dresden Codex, a document that offers an enigmatic glimpse into the Mayans' astral wisdom.
It's pure astronomical, the moon, the sun, the systems, everything is there. Anybody who has studied and analyzed that
enemy gunship in the air.
Enemy gunship spotted. A real treasure from the past.
Among the information contained in this codex is an eclipse prediction cycle.
The eclipse of 1991 appears in the Dresden Codex.
But did the Dresden Codex predict something more?
In it, they talk about the meeting with the Brothers of the Stars, which in our language we call extraterrestrials.
All right.
When I read this, after receiving all these videos, that struck me, that really affected me, because it's like if the Mayans knew long in advance that these sightings were going to take place that day. How can you explain that?
Enemy tank!
Is that a coincidence? Or they knew? I think they knew.
Over a century later, most Mexicans knew something out of the ordinary was happening. Their UFO wave had turned into a tsunami. Literally overnight, Mexicans are mesmerized by the apparent UFO wave striking their country. Ufologists point to the open-mindedness of the Mexican people as being partly responsible for this UFO explosion.
Mexicans have been fascinated by legends, stories, elves, fairies. That psychology and sociology allows Mexicans to keep an open mind when it comes to extraordinary occurrences. When you open yourself up to other possibilities, it is much easier to accept the UFO phenomenon.
However, skeptics claim that Mexico's UFO wave is more of a social phenomenon than any actual increase in visits from little green men.
sightings always seem to come in waves, and these waves are generally, they correlate with the publicity, that if the newspapers or TV stations, whatever, are filled with stories about UFO sightings, people will go out and pay much more attention to things that they see.
Since the earliest UFO sightings, witnesses have always been subject to heavy ridicule. They are portrayed as overzealous sky watchers who wouldn't know a DC-9 from a weather balloon. But what happens when the witness is someone who doesn't fit into these categories? What if the person has a solid reputation and career? What if the witness doesn't just know a DC-9, but flies one? Captain Raimundo Cervantes has been flying for over 40 years. With 17,000 hours of flight time, he has seen it all. Or at least he thought so. July 28, 1994. Captain Cervantes is piloting Aeromexico Flight 129 from Guadalajara to Mexico City. He's taken the route before and everything seems in order, including the weather.
I need a lift!
Totalmente claras.
Totally clear, like we the aviators say. We could see the next day, totally clear.
Grease monkey!
As the flight nears Mexico City International Airport, Cervantes puts the DC-9 on course for landing. 5,000 feet in the air, he receives the all clear from the control tower and prepares to lower the landing gear.
I ordered to lower the front wheel. At that moment, we felt an impact on the plane.
I need backup!
Very strong.
Muy fuerte.
The plane is rocked. To Cervantes, it appears obvious that they have collided with something in midair, but there is no time to investigate. The pilot has already begun his descent of the DC-9.
At that moment, I declare an emergency, and I requested an area so that I can develop the list of emergency and coordinate my personnel of flight attendants, because I thought we were going to have an abnormal landing.
Enemy gunship!
Unsure of the condition of the damage to his landing gear, Cervantes needs nerves of steel to coax the wounded jet to safety.
We level the plane.
Enemy tank!
We tried to land softly and steady the front wheel. I was concerned that there was damage.
We
lower the front wheel, and to our surprise, the plane starts rolling perfectly.
Bajamos la nariz y nuestra sorpresa empieza a rodar el avión perfectamente bien.
Disaster is averted. Captain Cervantes wonders if a helicopter has clipped his DC-9 on approach, but the air tower's radar records discredit that theory. Yet an inspection of the DC-9 reveals damage and creates more questions than answers.
There was a flight inspector that searched the plane, who detected that one of the hydraulic lines was cut. It was cut like if it was done with a cutter. Something very strange.
What caused the landing gear's hydraulic line to be cut?
Enemy infantry!
A subsequent investigation will place blame for the incident on worn-out parts, and the airline denies any mid-air collision. But Captain Cervantes stands by his claim that the plane hit something. That isn't the end of the story. Flight 129's strange encounter is about to get even stranger. Enrique Colbeck is an air traffic controller who was in the tower that night. Upon learning of Flight 129's incident, he instantly flashes back to a series of phone calls the tower had received earlier that evening.
An hour before that flight was initiated in Guadalajara, we received phone calls from different sources.
Enemy gunship in the air!
They were communicating to us that an object was flying very close to a building that is almost in the final trajectory to these runways.
The sightings place the unidentified flying object right in the landing path of Flight 129. To most, the idea of a plane UFO collision seems unrealistic. But a few days later, another incident at the same airport raises suspicions that something out of the ordinary is going on. August 8, 1994. Co-pilot Carlos Corzo is helping Aeromexico Flight 304 from Acapulco begin its descent into Mexico City International Airport. The morning skies are partly cloudy as co-pilot Corzo looks out the cockpit window. The pilot's eyes are glued to the instruments.
He was flying by instruments, so all his view was on the instruments, like was taking care of the surroundings and seeing outside, and even take the communications and helping him with the approach.
Repairs needed here.
As the plane breaks through a cloud, a shocked Corso finds something unexpected.
I was leaving 12,000 feet and came out of the cloud, and I see this big object in front of us, and I really get scared.
Up there,
I thought
enemy gunship.
we was going to have a collision, and I tell my captain in a surprise expression that, oh my God, we're gonna crash.
The mysterious craft streaks by the front of Flight 304, barely missing the plane's nose.
It was a huge object, maybe 15 or 20
Soldier, you deserve an award.
Radio, something like
an outpost is
or
lost.
some kind of very neat metal.
Corso quickly regains his composure and helps land the plane without further incident. Afterward, he speaks to an air traffic controller who reveals that Corso's plane was in fact the 5th plane that week to report seeing an unidentified object.
I
can tell you about approximately 99% of pilots that I have talked to believe that we are not alone here. And the evidence that we have had confirms it. We take it very seriously because it could affect our airspace.
Definitely, there is a potential danger because we do not know what produces the phenomenon and what it is made of and why it is manifested.
Nearly a decade later, another incident in the Mexican skies would send shockwaves worldwide. Yet, unlike previous encounters, this one would have everyone believing, including the Mexican government. Every year on the night of September 15th, they come together.
Enemy gunship in the air.
Thousands pack the main square in Mexico City to watch their president ring the very same bell that signaled the start of their fight for independence almost 2 centuries ago. The next 24 hours will be full of parades, parties, and celebrations. But in the early 1990s, a new Mexican Independence Day tradition is born.
El 16 de septiembre en México es la fiesta de independencia.
September 16 is Mexican independence, and we have a military parade on the streets of Mexico.
Durante varios años,
For several years, we used to have an air show. The whole Mexican Air Force used to go out and fly over Mexico City.
la Ciudad de México.
Mucha gente pues grababa los.
A lot of people would film these events when the planes would pass over the houses.
Enemy infantry inside. Enemy gunship.
Algunas maniobras.
There are many videos where certain objects are seen flying over and passing closely.
Sobrevolando y pasando incluso muy cerca.
Enemy infantry
September
inside.
16th, 1991. During a flyover, an amateur videographer captures a mysterious bright round object.
Walker spotted. It's definitely hostile.
September 16th, 1992. An unidentified object is spotted flying through the sky. September 16th, 1993. As a squadron of helicopters conducts maneuvers, a metallic-looking object appears to weave through their formation. 3 years, 3 sightings. Yet the Mexican military offers no comment on the encounters.
With respect to the sightings of these objects during military parades, the government never voiced an opinion for or against. The government here has always remained aloof.
Get in.
This comes as no surprise to the UFO community, who for decades has claimed that governments are actively suppressing UFO encounters. Blacked out reports, secret projects, and constant denials have all fed the notion of a massive cover-up. March 5th, 2004. Mexico's 501 Air Squadron is on a routine search for drug smuggling aircraft. But the military pilots witness something far from routine.
The Air Force in Mexico patrols the south border to stop airplanes with narcotics from South America. They regularly do this many times every day with different airplanes.
But this day is different. During an afternoon surveillance run, the team picks something up on their radar. They assume it's a drug-running plane and take off after it. Following it on radar, the object appears to be changing speeds erratically, at times traveling at over 380 miles per hour.
Enemy
While
infantry
in pursuit,
in sight.
the crew turns on their forward-looking infrared system, or FLIR.
Enemy infantry in
It's
sight.
like a camera that is mounted on the aircraft, and its purpose is to look not using visible light like an ordinary camera would, but using infrared.
Enemy APC.
The infrared eyes of the plane's exterior-mounted FLIR system transmits video to the crew inside. This is the actual video as seen by the crew. But as Mexican Air Patrol gets closer to the object, the crew are unable to spot anything using the FLIR or with their own eyes.
And all this time that they're flying towards it, they are looking ahead of the aircraft, because that's where it says that this radar target is, ahead of the aircraft, and they're looking, I couldn't see anything.
After chasing the object for several minutes, the crew determines they are too low on gas to continue the hunt. They turn around and begin heading back to the base. The unknown object soon vanishes from radar. Yet, their adventure is just beginning.
We're losing this battle.
The FLIR
Fight
operator
harder,
was
man.
still operating the FLIR, and he started picking up bright lights that appeared to be at cloud level.
Suddenly, appearing on the FLIR through the clouds isn't just one ball of light, but at times as many as 11 objects appear to be weaving through the clouds.
Righto!
The crew got a little bit spooked over what was going on because they couldn't identify these things. They didn't know what it was they were looking at.
Go, go,
This
go!
is a veteran crew who have flown this route before and have been using the FLIR system for almost 2 years. But on this day, even the most experienced of pilots would be unnerved, as the cockpit recordings reveal.
Hostile air transport! Enemy APC! Hostile APC
It appears
spotted.
to the crew the objects aren't just traveling alongside their plane, but surrounding it.
Enemy APC! Repairs needed here! We lost an outpost. Repairs needed here! Sorry, man.
Then
Forward!
suddenly, the balls of light disappear, leaving a scared and confused crew to return to base. Over the next several weeks, the Mexican military conducts an investigation into the incident. Crew members are interviewed, images analyzed, and weather data evaluated, yet no answers are found. It appears this case is destined to go unsolved and forgotten. Then one phone call changes everything and makes UFO history.
They called me and said, we have something that is from common interest.
Mexican TV journalist Jaime Maussan is an expert on investigating Mexican UFO claims. Maussan's impressive resume attracts the Mexican
Enemy
government,
infantry
who
in
asked
sight.
the civilian reporter to assist. In an unprecedented move,
Acknowledge.
Mexico's Secretary of Defense hands over to Maussan the classified FLIR UFO video.
All right.
He gave me
Understood. This
the
position.
video and said, please be fair with the military, please be fair with these pilots, do your investigation, you are authorized officially to do your investigation, to present this in the media.
Maussan is given complete access to flight records, weather reports, and most importantly, the crew members.
I am interviewing these pilots inside the Secretary of Defense. This is first in history in Mexico. They told me what they saw. They were very honest and sincere.
No, we never had the opportunity to identify them visually.
I never saw this kind of object before.
Something that we never saw before. It never happened to us before. So yes, we had fear.
On May 11th, Maussan holds a press conference to present the tape to the world. It doesn't take long for skeptics to denounce any UFO theory. Their explanations come fast and furious.
It's ball lightning. You'd have a whole fleet of these top secret aircraft flying.
Some skeptics and UFO investigators suggested that the equipment was not working well.
One after another, explanations are given, and one after another, they are discredited. However, a new theory emerges that might solve the mystery.
There's a theory that what the officials filmed out there were the flames of the oil wells that are 100 to 120 kilometers from the account.
They appear to be brilliant glowing objects in the infrared. Of course, they were not visible to the eye, but that's the whole purpose of the infrared camera system, is so that you can see things by their heat signature. You can see things that are not visible to the eye.
Could what was showing up on the FLIR system actually be distant oil wells? Those who examine the case have their doubts.
First thing that we did was analyze the lights to determine their shape, to see if there was shape to them, and how did it change frame to frame, minute to minute.
If the lights are oil wells, as skeptics have claimed, then they should flicker like a flame. But using computer programs to break down the lights reveals something very different.
Over a period of frames and minutes, the glow may change on the outer edges, but there is an object in the center that is rock steady. It's a ball, it's a sphere, and it's not possible that it's a flame, because if it was a flame, it would be undulating not just from the edges out, but over the entire object.
Enemy APC inside!
Adding to the case against the oil well theory is the fact that despite flights in this area daily, no one has ever reported this kind of encounter before.
The only way, really,
enemy infantry
to prove
inside.
This would be to do it under the same basis.
Enemy
using
Walker
a FLIR
inside.
camera, flying the same route, probably with the same airplane.
Until that happens, the Mexican Air Force encounter remains an unsolved mystery. But for UFO researchers, that doesn't take away from the importance of this landmark case. For the first time, a government turned to the UFO community for help. Mexican UFO investigators are optimistic that this incident may signal a new era of openness by governments.
This is going to produce many new cases and more openness in the future. There are many other people who are now trying to become investigators in Mexico. This is just the beginning.
It was just the beginning. In 2005, just when it appeared things couldn't get any stranger in Mexico,
Beacon is now active.
they did.
Is lost. Hostile infantry in sight.
Since 1991, Mexican witnesses have videotaped hundreds of hours of footage containing alleged unidentified flying objects.
Go, go, go!
But while the sheer volume of sightings has impressed some, it's what's on these tapes that matters.
But out of the thousands and thousands of videos that we have, most of the times are
we got company! Outpost under control. Grace Monkey!
Stars. Mistakes. Honest mistakes. Probably just 10 or 15% of them are good. Really good.
It's this 10% that has drawn the attention of everyone from ufologists to the mainstream media. Among the most interesting UFO phenomenons captured on tape are what is referred to as fleets.
Enemy APC, enemy infantry inside.
I need three objects we call fleets. They travel horizontally or vertically with very strange forms as boomerangs, spheres, discs.
June 10th, 2004, Guadalajara, Mexico. An amateur photographer captures unknown objects in the sky. June 21st, 2004, 300 miles away in Cuernavaca, Mexico, another fleet is caught on tape. March 30th, 2005, almost 600 miles north in Torreon, yet more unexplainable objects dot the Mexican sky. April 11th, 2005, 500 miles to the south in Mexico City, the skies over the capital city are full of mysterious aircraft.
I believe it's a way that someone is using to communicate with us. I believe they are trying to say something similar to what happened in England with the crop formations.
Skeptics are quick to dismiss fleets as nothing more than weather balloons or birds. But seeing is believing. And in June 2005, a fleet sighting had people believing.
One of the more recent accounts of UFO sightings here in Mexico happened here in Jalapa, Veracruz. And it is very interesting because the witnesses were of a very high caliber.
June 24, 2005, 10:30 a.m. A public ceremony is being held to celebrate the delivery of new patrol cars to the local police department. On hand are such dignitaries as Governor Fidel Herrera Beltran, high-ranking police department officials, and the local media. Moments after Governor Beltran finishes his speech, cries of UFO, UFO echo through the crowd. Instantly, all eyes are on the mysterious objects hovering above.
We have as a first-hand witness the governor of Jalapa, and the newspapers published the news the next day, and it was spread throughout Mexico.
Days later, a local newspaper reports that the alleged UFOs were actually balloons released by local schoolchildren. But this explanation only raises more questions for UFO believers. If they were balloons, why did they appear frozen in formation for over half an hour?
As the witness says, it was more than 14 sphere objects that were shining in the sky, formed a triangle formation and remained there for 30 minutes. I just find it hard to believe that balloons could stay in the same place and in the same formation for half an hour.
I think this is an extraordinary observation because it's a governor and all of his advisors and police personnel who observed this case. Would you say to the governor that he didn't see something strange in the sky?
It's those strange things in the sky that have brought together these UFO experts and enthusiasts. From all parts of Mexico, they have come to discuss the UFO wave that their country has undergone. For these men and women, the encounters that have taken place deserve attention and answers. Among the incidents they examined is the alleged 1974 UFO plane collision near Coyame, Mexico.
The word is getting around somehow that something happened, and that the U.S. was interested in this crash.
The information that Gilberto has is very little, but the data that makes this case lends itself to the possibility that this may have been real.
3 decades later, Coyame still has more questions than answers. But are there clues out there that could break the case wide open?
Any motivated investigative journalism student of today, or professional, could have a field day. Go to the town, track down all the people in the town that used to be there, live there by address, and find them and interview them.
It requires more rigorous study. It requires more of a collaborative effort, hopefully among the UFO research communities between the United States and Mexico. So it's a case that's going to need more further investigation.
And like any seminal event in history, there is a last-second plot twist.
I was recently in Chihuahua and I asked about this case, and there is a rumor that there are photographs around this case that I haven't seen. I was promised that I was going to receive these photographs, but people there are still afraid. It seems that they have kept these photographs for a long, long time.
Fittingly, once again, the Coyame story is shrouded in mystery. Did a UFO crash in the Mexican desert in August of 1974? Did a Mexican recovery team fall prey to an unknown biological poison?
Enemy forces in sight!
The truth may never be known. But what we do know is that over the last 15 years, Mexico has experienced something out of the ordinary. For UFO believers, this appears to be a golden age of alien encounters. Only one thing is certain. Mexico A land steeped in history is now steeped
Enemy
in
APC
mystery.
located. Enemy walker spotted. Enemy sniper. Need help.
In Timna dated this major period to
Need help. Enemy walker
in
spotted.
13th century BCE.
Enemy forces in sight. Secured. Enemy forces.
All along. Written evidence provides an interesting link between King Solomon and copper.
According to the biblical text, copper was used to furnish and help
This channel.
people.
This channel is part of the History Hit.
Understood. This position.
One of these three men is an expert on unidentified flying objects. What is your name, please?
Enemy sniper.
My name is J. Allen Hynek.
Outpost under control.
J. Allen Hynek. My name is J.
Acknowledge. Assault this position.
J. Allen Hynek came into the UFO field with the typical scientific attitude, which is they shouldn't be studied, there's nothing to them.
Ultimately, that changed, and that's sort of the core of the J. Allen Hynek story.
I, J. Allen Hynek, am a consultant to the United States
Orbital
Air
strike,
Force
your
on
area.
unidentified flying objects.
Like so many other key figures,
We lost enough infantry in sight.
Hynek had to push against the government that he once worked for and stand up for the truth.
I am also professor of astronomy and director of a large university
This is
observatory.
it. We're the last ones
Hynek
left.
believed that science was the tool. Science could get us to an
Enemy forces
understanding
in sight.
of what UFOs are. And that's what he advocated for.
There are a lot of people who don't always understand his rationale for the things he did or the things he said. But Hynek's impact today, I think, is immeasurable.
Only one of these men is the real J. Allen Hynek. The other two are imposters and will try to fool this panel. On to tell the truth.
We get reports every night.
I don't know what the hell it is. Looks like a rotating light around it. Outpost under control.
Report a UFO.
Enemy infantry.
The U.S. government closed its formal study of UFOs, Project Blue Book, in late 1969. And the government as a whole says we're not interested in UFO reports.
The Air Force made the decision, let's get out of this business of investigating UFOs. Our business is national security. We've seen no threat. Let's stop Project Blue Book.
J. Allen Hynek, who was the scientist who worked for Project Blue Book for almost 20 years, actually came through that with the opposite perspective, which was that UFOs were something serious and they should be investigated.
In my association with Project Blue Book, I know very well that it was not a scientific project. I also know that they never would notify the media when an interesting case came up. They did everything they could to keep it down. So they definitely withheld information.
Dr. Hynek realized
we lost an outpost.
This was a serious problem. The UFO reports could not all be explained, and that the military should be taking this more seriously.
We now know that there were UFO
Enemy
cases
APC
during this time
inside.
period that did seem to have national security implications.
I know that when I was
Transport requested.
There were a number of cases that never got into Blue Book. There are witnesses.
Forward!
This is observed at a missile base. This was observed by an Air Force pilot. You mean to tell me that the CIA or the FBI and the government hasn't investigated this?
I think the public
we got company! Enemy APC!
To realize that there were incidents going back even into the 60s
Hostile APC
where
spotted.
our nuclear missile silos were being interfered with.
Great enemy sniper!
Production facilities,
all
weapons
right.
facilities. We've had incidents over numerous ICBM
Soldier,
bases.
you deserve an award.
During the Cold War, intercontinental ballistic missiles, called ICBMs, were strategically located throughout northern parts of the United States, where they were within striking distance of the Soviet Union.
There were almost identical UFO events at 2 of the Minuteman ICBM locations.
We're almost out of reinforcements.
At Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota in 1966, and at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in 1967.
My name is Robert Salas. In 1967, I was a lieutenant in the Air Force, stationed in Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana.
My name is David Shimley. I'm a retired Air Force captain at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota. In 1966, my responsibility was to launch our 10 nuclear-tipped missiles upon appropriate and verified order.
My name is Robert Jameson. I was a first lieutenant in the United States Air Force, Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. One of my jobs was to, if a missile goes off alert for any reason, is to go out and restart it.
The Air Force includes missile men. Here at Malmstrom Air Force Base, a strategic missile wing controls the most modern Minuteman in its underground silo. The Air Force specialists on this job, by continuous readiness to launch their bird, help prevent rather than start a nuclear war.
Forward!
We had Minuteman I missiles, and that's what, 800 kiloton weapon. And just for reference, the weapons that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were 20 kilotons.
That capability is helping to keep the peace. We have a policy of mutually assured destruction. It would be suicide for us or our potential adversaries to launch a nuclear attack, unless they could disable that capability in that
Enemy
system.
infantry spotted!
Then they could conceivably decapitate the United States, destroy the capital without fear of a retaliatory response, and change the global balance of power.
Our location was 60 feet underground.
We were very well protected.
It was a concrete steel reinforced capsule.
And this capsule was sitting
Enemy
below
tank spotted!
We call it the Launch Control Facility.
We had 6 security guards topside. They had the responsibility for making sure there was nobody trying to break in.
In fact, traveled to base to attend a pre-departure crew briefing. After the briefing, several missile crews came up to me and said, "Did you hear what happened overnight?"
Sometime in the evening hours, I get up a call from the main guard upstairs. He tells me that there are strange lights flying over the facility. They're looking at reddish-orange, glowing, pulsating light. It's hovering just above the front gate.
And he pointed with his arms, and he says it was right out there, hovering, motionless and without sound.
They did think that there was a solid object within the light, sort of oval-shaped. I kind of dismissed it.
Enemy infantry spotted!
You mean like UFOs? And kind of laughed.
I need a lift!
He said, "Well, they're not airplanes, sir." About 5 minutes later, he calls back and he's screaming in the phone. Now, he's very frightened.
Repairs needed here.
He said he's got all the guards out there with their weapons drawn.
Darn it,
he wanted
sorry.
orders on what to do. I told him, make sure nothing enters the fenced area. When I hung up the phone, I thought we were under attack. By who or what, I had no idea. And then we get bells and whistles going off at our control.
I need a ride.
And we could see lights going from green to red, all across the board. Meaning the missiles were
Walker spotted. It's definitely hostile.
If the
Can't do
president
it.
had given the order to launch the missiles, we could not have launched them.
Losing 10 missiles was a shock. Except for that instance, I never lost more than one missile at a time.
Somehow, some way, vehicles were able to maneuver right over those ICBMs. And
I need repairs!
We don't know why they went down, and still don't know. There's no other reason I can think of that would cause the 10 to go off alert within seconds.
We knew it. It wasn't an ordinary man-made machine because we had nothing like that.
After the incident, I was required not to speak to anybody about it.
I attempted to question the security guard, and he said, "Sorry, sir, I've been told to keep quiet." And he was told that, as far as you're concerned, it never happened.
I had to go through a special briefing. This is where they told me, you're not supposed to say ever again that something happened, because nothing happened. Of course, the first thing I did when I got home was, "Hey, hon, guess what happened?"
There was a man from Air Force Office of Special Investigations. All he wanted me to do was to sign this document, stating I would never speak about this again. Once we signed that document, we were released, told to leave, and that was that. I never spoke about any of this until 1994, so it was about 27 years later.
3 years after the Malmstrom incident, in which 10 missiles were shut down, the Air Force released a fact sheet to the public announcing the close of Project Blue Book. And it stated that no UFO reported, investigated, or evaluated by the Air Force was ever an indication of a threat to our national security. Meaning not even one has represented any kind of national security threat.
That was certainly a lie. Let's use the right word. The Air Force knew full well these were UFO-related incidents, and that UFOs were responsible for the shutdown.
And I experienced just a joyful freedom, and I finally was able to tell my wife my secret. And so, thanks, Robert, for helping me out.